Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Driving My Mind podcast. And again, thank you guys so much for letting me take that little hiatus. Anytime after Labor Day from September to essentially now, a teacher's life is a struggle for sure. Minimal breaks. You're working back to back to back. And I needed that time with my kiddos, with my classroom. They're a much better behaved group than last year's, but they definitely need more instruction, which is quite strange because this is the first group of kiddos that essentially had a full year of school. They weren't COVID kids or anything like that. A couple of them missed preschool or TK, but they were at least able to take kindergarten. And for some reason or another, I'm working quite extensively on catching up on some skills needed from first grade and kindergarten. So anywho, that's what I get paid for, and I wish I got paid more. But people will say I'm living well, but we don't get paid in the summer. We don't get paid for our time off. And you think to yourself, well, you signed a contract. Why don't you negotiate? We're public employees. We don't get, in essence, to negotiate a higher salary like a computer engineer would be able to, or something like that. So at the end of the day, you just got to do it for, community service, public service, your ability to enjoy the job as much as you can. And you can already hear my fake laughing on that point. But again, thank you guys so much for staying with me, staying with my YouTube channel, Your Ride and I. If you haven't taken a look at or listened to, I was able to do a few car shows during the Thanksgiving break, and I'm shaking off this cough. So if you hear me cough from time to time, please, I apologize. I'm not going to go back and edit it. I'm going to try to get this all in one. There's your cough. One stream, right? So today, and don't I've not neglected the podcast, but sometimes it's just hard finding that 1 hour in the day, especially with the new Modern Warfare out and everything, to get squared away with the car stuff. And so here I am. I got ideas, and one of the ideas I really, really wanted to talk to you guys about today is, if you read the title already, car hindsight, and how that has affected everyone's purchasing decision in one time or another, especially as a car enthusiast, maybe perhaps going through car after car after car, what appears to be a good idea at the time ends up not being a good idea. And you go through your battle of regrets and frustration and anger and bouts of depression even, really trying to figure out if this car is worth keeping in your life or to let it go, and will you regret it if you let it go? And so that's what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. So my definition of car hindsight is understanding that you bought a car, it didn't work out for you, and you sell it, and then you look back and regret it, right? Because, just like they said, if only the past, what's that saying? If hindsight is a 20/20 vision, right? I forgot the saying. Man, I just had it. I should have wrote it down. But hindsight is just knowing if you would have known what you know now, essentially, right? And I can always go back and think, man, I had a 92 Acura Integra. That was like my first ever car I bought from a buddy of mine in high school for $1,900. I made payments to him until I was able to buy it right on. I learned manual shifting. I learned how to drive stick in that car, and it was a non-VTEC car. And I knew I had plans on doing VTEC head swap and going through my bouts of getting to learn that car and know that car. And I was still working for Honda at the time. I had access to discounted parts as long as I had the part number through my dealership. And that was an amazing car, but in hindsight, I should have never have went after that car to begin with. I should have saved my money and went straight for something like a GSR at the time, because you could find GSRs at the time for about 5 to 6 grand, which again in the early 2000s was still quite a chunk of change. But the new RSX Type S was already coming out, and Acura at the time, it was what, $21,000 to $24,000. So all the old Integras and the GSRs and all those B series were going down in price at the time. And so I wish I would have been like, this was a DA9, so this was the older Integra, but I would have just thought to myself, man, and spending the $1,900 and probably another $2,000 in fixing it up and hopping it up, if I would have just saved that money and just got a legit Integra GSR at the time, I would have been head over heels, because I would have kept that car, 1,000%. And a stupid reason, the DA9, I was taking a turn too quickly, and I spun the rear, which was really crazy, and I ended up crashing it and bending the subframe in the back. And so I ended up selling it to one of the porters at the dealership, and he had connections out in Mexicali on repairing that subframe and all the damage. And that car is probably sitting in a junkyard for parts, and it's been a waste of a car, if you will. And it's I loved the DA9. I mean, the paint was obviously flaking and bad, but dude, I loved the way it sounded. I loved that B18B, I think it was. It was the non-VTEC B8 B series motor, but it was quite torquey, and it loved to rev out until about 7,000, I think. It was no VTEC though. And again, that was my hindsight kind of moment. And everyone says, well, things happen for a reason. That's when I got my 240SX as a replacement, and I got into the rear wheel drive and the drifting kind of stuff right before Tokyo Drift. So soon those cars became really, really hot, and I still have my 240SX to this day, because I'm afraid of hindsight catching up to me. And for me wanting to sell or get rid of this car, would I face that regret? Because anytime I take that 240 out, these young kids are like, oh my God, dude, my 240 is beat up. It has some really high end parts or quality parts in it. Like the freaking limited slip differential was like $1,800, but it's a car that I don't want to get rid of. I don't want to create a moment of fear of missing out, right? FOMO, right? As the new cats and kids call it, and missing out on the fact that I sold the car, or some kid that's going to pay me 10 or 15K for it, and because he has a fear of FOMO, right? A fear of missing out. And so those things, I look back in my car collection, my car life, and I that's what I worry about and I struggle with, and I know that I'm not the only one out there, and that's why I kind of wanted to bring this up to you guys. What is your car hindsight moment? What was that one project car that gave you pain and struggle, and you say to yourself, this sucks, right? Here's your hindsight. This is a project that is going nowhere. I should have not got that salvaged title Dodge RT Magnum. That's my buddy Soto. He had a V8 Magnum the wagon, right? The Dodge RT Magnum wagon, which is super cool, especially if you got the SRT model. Like, dude, those things are holding its value like crazy, 30 or 40K. And he got this car at the time, it was a salvage, and so it had a lot of problems. It was just not a good copy of the car, but he had to pour money into it because it was his only car. And, people always say that we always make fun of the título salvaje, right? When you go on Craigslist and you see the salvaged car and you think, why would anyone buy it? But people think, oh, I'm going to be able to transform it. I'm going to be able to, to fix it up, to make it my own personality and all that. I just think, oh my God, you are setting yourself up. And maybe it's just because I'm naturally pessimistic or negative about, everything, everything in life. Don't tell my therapist that. But, I go to things in such a pessimistic view of, you are getting into something you're going to regret. And maybe it's a defense mechanism for myself, or maybe it's the fact that I've just seen so many projects and so many car purchases just go awry. You hear about people, and this not only goes into old cars, it goes into new cars as well. You see people with new cars and they buy a car and they keep it for 2 months, 3 months. They've barely sent one payment to the bank and they're already trading it in and getting rid of it. You see cars at the dealership or at CarMax with 300 miles. I on Facebook, it always keeps popping up, like Porsche Cayman GT4s or 911 Carrera S's with like 800 to 1,000 miles. It probably still has the new car smell. And it's maybe last year's model, but it was purchased this year, as a 22. You know what I'm saying? And this is 23, so it was last year's model, but they bought it within a year time frame, and they're already trading it in. Why? Did they not know what they were getting themselves into? Same thing with a project car, right? You're buying a Cayman GT4 and thinking that this car is going to be something that you can go to In-N-Out Burger in? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And for those people, I wonder if they had that hindsight moment. Like, do they realize, oh my God, I don't need this much Cayman, or oh my God, this Cayman does suck when I actually drive it around town. I don't get it. I don't get how people don't do their due diligence on what they are really, truly getting themselves into. Like, or you know what? I wanted this Cayman in order to get a spot for a GT3, which again, I understand with Porsche because they're really kind of weird when it comes to that. But I just think, like, why go through all the effort or bother doing that? It makes no sense to me, and that's the hindsight. And to kind of wrap it up, and I'm making this kind of a shorter podcast just so I can still kind of like ease myself into it. But a lot of this car hindsight goes into that FOMO, that fear of missing out. And so you tend to make those irrational decisions because you think, I'm never going to get this opportunity to buy this GT4, or I'm never going to get this opportunity to find an Acura Integra from the early 90s, or I'm never going to get this opportunity to get a Lexus V8, right? But there always will be those opportunities. Now, is it going to be the same price? Well, no. Look at the S2000s, right? I mean, finally the market's calmed down a little bit, but there was a point where it's kind of like I could sell my approaching 90,000 mile, very clean example though, 2003 AP1 for $30,000 to $40,000. That is ridiculous because that car, I'm sorry, is not worth in today's money $30,000 to $40,000. It's a wonderful car. It's a great experience driving that car, and there's, it's classic Honda. It's what people think Honda is. It has a lot of nostalgia. It's featured in Fast and the Furious. But all those reasons don't make it a $30,000 or $40,000 car, but people want to experience that car. And so the demand, the consumer demand raises, and that therefore the prices raise up. And so, I can remember a time where S2000s were going for 10 to 15K. NSXs were 30 to 40K. Now I look on my feed on Facebook and I see NSXs, granted in excellent condition and prime condition, going for $140,000 to $170,000. It boggles my mind to think that someone is paying for, granted, again, this is a later model with the C32, but that people are spending $170,000 in today's money for an early 2000s and mid-engine VTEC C32 with 292 horsepower, right? But it's the nostalgia that people have and the fear of missing out that gets them to make these rash consumer decisions that you've heard from my previous podcasts really truly affect the car enthusiast, because as soon as one person buys a 100,000 mile S2000 for $45,000, well, there's no different than buying cars, right? Or buying houses. One house in the neighborhood sells for $100,000 above what they should be paying for, and then everyone thinks that their house is worth that much more. So, to end, please, friends, with hindsight, do your research, do your due diligence. Are you using this as a daily driver, or is this your second car in the garage, or perhaps third car in the garage? I have podcasts talking about that. Okay. Are you going to be able to, get over that fear of missing out and wait for something that's going to be exactly what you want? Or, hey, life happens. You get someone knocked up, or, you lose your job. Well, it's a good thing you don't have a project car waiting to be, that's already gutted, the motor's burnt out, and what you paid for originally, you will not be able to get back selling it for scrap, right? So be mindful of hindsight. Be mindful of fear of missing out, and do not make rash decisions when purchasing cars. That is my best advice for you. Thank you again for tuning into my podcast again that I've sorely neglected, but I needed to. I needed to for my kiddos and my job, truthfully. So I'm gonna do a quick edit of this. I'm just gonna do the RSS thumbnail, which I actually do like, and let me just do this for fun. I love the air horn, man. I can't complain about that. Hopefully that played for you guys. But anyways, thank you guys so much. I'll try to be a little more consistent with the podcast now that things are winding down, and I'll catch you guys next week.